Hello, this is Miraj again. This is part five of the series of why projects failed. This would be the last part that we're going to be that I'm going to be covering. Um, in this area, in this part five, I'm going to be talking about lack of organizational support. Right. Obviously, that's another key area that the projects, especially the larger projects, are depending on. Well, actually, all sizes are depending on, but it becomes more important when the project size is large. You're obviously typically dealing with cross-functional teams, so people kind of from different departments reporting to different bosses, etc. So the four different areas within lack of organizational support that I've highlighted here is business politics, stakeholder conflict, lack of management commitment, and lack of competent resources. So let's start talking about each one of this separately so I can kind of highlight a little more. Business politics and stakeholder conflict are somewhat related but different. So business politics, what does that mean? Many times what happens is in there may be kind of just latent conflict going on between the bosses of these different departments, and there's kind of a tussle, maybe tug of war going on. Maybe there's the way the organization is structured, the incentivizing, etc. Maybe kind of just not conducive to for the cohesiveness of different business departments working together. They may be having different priorities within their different areas. Marketing may have a separate project. Finance may be kind of looking at different things. IT may be looking at a third thing. So there may be all these things kind of going on. So this is really where the organizational project management culture kind of comes in, and PMO helps building this thing, if you will. This is where the project manager is going to need some help from his or her bosses, if you will, to kind of corral people together, if you will. And sometimes it's some what you have to kind of understand is the people you're dealing with, maybe the peers of your boss, right? So that kind of gets more interesting. But what you need to do again here is basically work with the leadership, kind of work with your boss to provide some, air cover, if you will, to help with the business politics. So maybe, if there are certain departments that, have the things are not incentivized properly, etc. What we need to understand and what we need to, or what the PMO needs to kind of get this to is basically kind of meeting the project goal to the organizational strategic goal, right? So that kind of makes it a level higher than each department's individual, kind of goals, if you will, because that's kind of at an organization level, everybody kind of, that needs to follow that, right? So that's one thing, kind of seeking help from, your boss. The second thing is basically creating a steering committee for the project, right? If it's a large project, I'm not saying that basically for small projects, each project needs to have a separate steering committee. Steering committee is really kind of what it sounds like, right? It kind of helps steer the project when, help the project manager steer the project where it is needed, right? So it's going to be composed of the leadership, the executive leadership, or at some level, some leadership that are, have the capability to basically make some decisions around this project, if you will, that can help the project kind of keep going, if you will, right? And then along with the steering committee, kind of understanding or guiding them that exactly what the roles are, the steering committee is going to have as part as a key member is going to be the sponsor of the project. Sponsor meaning the person who's basically funding the project, right? That has approved and basically is championing the project, and that typically for large projects is going to be somebody in kind of the executive team, if you will. So they need to be a key member of the steering committee, but also you need to have membership from the other departments, the other key departments that have a skin in the game, if you will, or that are stakeholders. They may be affected by the product, or they may be having their resources that are needed to work on this project, etc. Right? So having the steering committee, also having a process built so that you can if it's an urgent thing, how can you cut through, how can you basically get to the steering committee earlier than maybe kind of a standing meeting of the steering committee on the project, because obviously when you're involving the executive team, you don't want to have this too much time. You need to be more paying attention to the time, if you will, than usual. I mean, obviously you have to pay attention to the time for everybody's time, but at an executive level, they're involved with many more things, many more important things as well. So you need to kind of make sure that there is a emergency path to get to the steering committee if needed. Also, what you want to do is basically maybe kind of have an organizational governance committee, if you will, as well, that is dealing with the membership is going to be fairly static, but what it's dealing with is kind of just not one project at a time, but kind of an overall project at an overall project level. So if things are needed to be addressed, etc., we can kind of give a bigger picture to this committee and get some help if needed, to resolve certain things. On smaller projects, typically it's the sponsor that's going to be helping you to your escalation point. But having that overall governance committee helps, because when there are business conflicts or business politics going on, and you have to kind of present an overall picture and basically present options of how we can do, because many times it may be kind of you need a resource or something that may be kind of allocated to another project. So, having that governance committee helps you, kind of with those kind of things that, to kind of get it out of the, more political game, if you will, because everything is kind of, laid down as an overall, all this is going on. So basically, they can help make some decisions, if you will. Second is stakeholder conflict. And, as I mentioned that this is sort of related to the business politics, but also it may be somewhat different again, because, different stakeholders may be kind of thinking, may have different styles, if you will, right? So, one stakeholder may be kind of more, conducive to having a structured process. Another may be kind of more of kind of, flying by the seat of their pants, right? So that's kind of, something you have to manage as a project manager, would need to manage and see how we can basically make this work with, especially the key stakeholders. How can you work with their personality styles, to kind of keep things moving? You have to understand, one of the key things in project management is the soft skills, right? You have to understand different personalities. You have to understand how to communicate to them, what makes things work for them, if you will, and so that you're kind of basically helping your project, being that bridge between the different stakeholders, and trying to kind of, work through conflicts, if you will. there may be a resource conflict that somebody working within the stakeholder himself or herself, or somebody in their teams may be kind of having a conflict. So how do you kind of work with them? Again, it's you look at the overall picture, you look at the personalities, if you will, and then you have to see that what personality is served by uh, in what ways, how they will be able to understand the problem better, and then kind of just work with that personality at a one-on-one level, if you will, so that you can kind of work through the project. Sometimes it's better to have kind of a offline with certain people to kind of make them understand your point, and then basically kind of get in a group, or prior to getting everybody together, if you will. So that's just kind of a few things on that. Lack of management commitment, right? Um, One of the things that I see a lot is, you know, people have short-term memories, right? They may approve things, by just, kind of nodding their heads, or, another thing I've found is basically, for example, IT departments, if somebody is needing a project to be done by the IT department, for your IT department is part of the, project, they are there's not a set structure of how to ask, what's kind of the intake process of the project, if you will, right? So what happens is, this person may be kind of going to somebody some manager in IT department, and then basically, that manager, not knowing what all is going on, just kind of basically nods their head, and, things get started, and then later on, everybody's like, exactly what happened here. So making sure that the management, there's a formal acceptance process where management is either signing off, or it has some kind of a approval step that they're emailing to say yes, approved, etc. That makes a lot of difference. I've always seen that when if you're simply kind of sending a document to somebody and just kind of verbally asking them, if they're okay, it's one thing. But when you ask them to sign somewhere or provide a written acceptance, people actually start reading things, right, and paying attention to it. So it's important to make sure that people, the management, understand what is their ask. If it's a resource allocation, it's important for them to understand what kind of commitment that you're needing for their resources to be, on this project, if you will, and you have something in writing. So if you have to go back to it, and you can. Obviously, it's not just to kind of threaten them, but it's when you have things in writing, it kind of gets a little bit more serious. People kind of start paying attention, rather than just kind of nodding their head, if you will, and just forgetting it later. Um, Also, just kind of on that point, just one other thing before I move on to the last point. Also, kind of just make sure that you're paying attention as a project manager, or as a project leader, to understand that they're not overcommitting things, right, to things, right, based on your experience, expertise, etc. You're trying to guide them as well, so they're not being unrealistic, and then that's going to come back and bite them later, right? You're not kind of trying to create a gotcha moment with the written acceptance, but you're trying to, in the best interest of the company, you're working things out, and you're kind of identifying as much as you can earlier on, so it doesn't become an issue later. The last one is lack of competent resources, and it's sort of related with another one that we had talked about before, as far as in the planning portion, etc., that having adequate resources and all, but also many times people try to kind of just whatever resources are available, try to fit them in, right? Now, obviously, it makes sense, that you are trying to make do with what you have, and kind of increase their utilization instead of spending more, more on outside resources, or if an outside resource will be able to play a role in this. But what you need to make sure that you are um, reasonable in this one, right? If this is a new technology that they're going to be picking up, right, make sure that not only they have some training, but maybe they are kind of shadowing somebody who's more of an expert, if that expertise is required before they start taking on, if you will. There's make sure that you have if that is not a resource or cannot be a resource, you raise your hand early on and basically either get the right resource or build that risk in your project, so it's understood, and people have signed up for taking that risk, if you will, and you have kind of a trigger point where you have some kind of a mitigation for that risk, also identified, right? Obviously, in an ideal world, you want to have the right resources working for the right project at the right time, right? But also, what you have to, in order to be realistic, what you have to also think about is they need to have the competency to at least kind of grow into one. And if the project is going to the project timelines and importance is going to support for them to kind of build into one, in order to do it. So that's kind of a little bit about that. um, Actually, one other thing before I leave that topic, also kind of think about, is this something that and I talked a little bit about it in another part. Is this something that basically, if is going to be needing some business knowledge, if this role is going to be needing some business knowledge, that you can't just hire somebody from outside, from off the street, and basically put them here. So would it make more sense to have this resource, an internal resource, work on it, and in order to backfill them temporarily, you have some contractor or somebody else kind of within the company kind of doing, helping them out, or or if you can basically fill this in with an expert, right? So all those kind of things you have to kind of think through and see that what makes sense. But again, what you don't want to do is, you're building, it's a critical project for the company. You're putting a new team on this, if you will, that have not used this product or not have built this product before. In that case, you want to basically hire an expert and kind of have your team work with the expert so that they can gain the knowledge, and maybe at some point, for a future release, they can either take on the project, or after the project is delivered, they can take the support of the project and maintain the project. So hope this series has been helpful. Obviously, this is just a quick attempt, a very kind of a raw attempt by me to just communicate a few things around why projects fail. Projects obviously are defined as an initiative that is temporary. It has a definite start date and a definite end date, and is producing a product, and has a deliverable at the end, right? So it has a definite outcome to it, if you will. So what that kind of tells you is, any change is a project, right? Anything which is not maintenance, right, or just regular operations, is a project. So anything that is getting built is a project. So there's a lot of projects going on, and there's a lot of projects, unfortunately, that are failing, right? And so we need to pay the right attention, so that we are not kind of just kind of checking off boxes, but kind of paying attention to these areas, so we can help make sure that the project delivery is optimal. We are not, expectations are met, and whatever methodologies you're following, you're constantly in sync with what is getting delivered, and things are not a surprise for the stakeholders, and the other way around as well, that the stakeholders are are communicating, and it's a cohesive team. So thank you very much. If you have, I would love to hear your comments. You can also visit my website, myprotraining.com, and if you need to contact me, put some communication there, and I'll make sure that I respond to you. Thanks.